Okay, so thank you for joining us this evening. And this is our last session before we have the retreat weekend. And well, actually, I talk in weekends because that's what we do here at Chan Music Institute. But it's going to be Sunday for you for the 3-hour session. So this is our last teaching session. And it's on probably one of the most precious topics of the three principal aspects of the path, the correct view of emptiness. So like we usually do, let's get into a meditation which will lead into our refuge prayer. And I'll just get the screen up so we will have the prayers accessible. Okay. I'm assuming you can see everything you need there. All right, so just find a comfortable position. Hopefully you've already been doing your 9-round breathing prior to logging in. So that's always something good just to establish a good basis for being able to take in the teachings, the precious nectar, and drink it up. So being a Mahayana practice, we always visualize ourselves surrounded by all living beings as vast as space. And they're appearing in human form, but still undergoing their individual 6-realm sufferings. And so just bring that to mind. You can have your mother, whether she's alive or passed on, or your mother figure, left side, father right. People who support us, our friends, our family behind. People who challenge us in front. And all other sentient beings as limitless as space. And so we are their representative. They're relying on us. And so we can just reflect on our own personal situation, how we've been continuously circling in samsara. It's beginningless time. Never without a moment's break from suffering. Wherever we go, whatever realm we're in, we're pervaded by suffering, tormented by suffering. In this way, our suffering is not only beginningless, but endless, unless we do something about it while we have the opportunity this lifetime. So now is the time to be liberated. This life we have received due to our merit and past virtuous karma, particularly ethics. We've received a perfect human rebirth. So feeling how fortunate we are to have all the conditions, the freedoms and opportunities to be able to practice the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, causes for happiness. But there's no certainty or guarantee that these conditions will last even beyond today. In fact, death could come even tonight. And when the time of our death comes, it's not that we have a choice. We don't have the freedom to choose which rebirth we take, in which realm. And so very easily we could quickly fall down to the lower realms. You can even think which will come first, the next in-breath or the three lower realms, one of them. Could we even endure the unrelenting torture for even 1 second if tomorrow our body and mind was that of a brutalized hell being, tormented, incredible sufferings? Would we be able to bear it for even 1 second, 1 moment? Or the desperation of being a hungry ghost? So much suffering. Or the body and mind of a defenseless animal? Or even if we were thrown into a fortunate rebirth due to our karma and afflictions at the time of death? Then we would have to continue like this life to experience countless problems, one after the other, not getting what we want, getting what we don't want, uncontrolled sickness and aging and death, dissatisfaction, anxiety, conflicts, wars, so many sufferings, relationship problems and breakdowns. It's like one suffering replaced with another, endlessly. And even if we did secure another fortunate rebirth, in the very next life following, we could easily fall back to the lower realms from where we've spent many lifetimes. And so there's just no certainty within samsara. In the lower realms, we would be without the protection, the refuge, the support of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And so it would become so difficult to escape, to generate virtue at the time of death, to accomplish a fortunate rebirth. And so our situation really is quite urgent, not knowing when death will come, not knowing when the very conditions we have right now will fade away. having this human intelligence, we can discern causes for happiness from causes of suffering, engage in virtue, refrain from non-virtue. We can come to know the faults of samsara and the benefits of liberation. But if we were to just liberate ourselves and leave every other sentient being to suffer endlessly, it would be quite unconscionable. Certainly not the meaning, purpose of our life. And so while there are numberless sentient beings suffering in samsara, the very conditions by which we achieve all the stages of the path and have all the benefits we enjoy life after life, the love and care and kindness they've shown to us when they've cared for us as our parent, our mother or father, leaves us with no choice but to use our life in the most meaningful way with the greater purpose of not only freeing myself from suffering, but freeing all sentient beings from their suffering and bring them to full enlightenment. To be able to do that, we need to rely on Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the Buddha, the teacher, the fully enlightened one, the Dharma as presented by the Buddha, the scriptures, and generate the realizations, true paths, true cessations in our own continuum. Rely on those who already have true paths, true cessations in their mind, the Arya Sangha. And so for this greater purpose, we can go for refuge to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, to achieve Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in our own continuum. And so we can feel that Guru Shakyamuni Buddha is in front of us, hearing our wishes and thoughts and prayers, aspirations. And he says to us, son or daughter of the lineage, if you want to be liberated from the suffering of samsara, I will guide you. And so wholeheartedly we can rely on Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And we can imagine that we are leading all sentient beings surrounding us in this journey. And so with the three principal aspects in mind, seeing that through emptiness all of this is made possible, we can go for refuge together if you like. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. And so what we're up to in this last session is we're still on the great scope from the three scopes that Lamritisha has compiled as the framework of the entire Lam Rim, the graduated path to enlightenment. And within the great scope, we're still looking at a true path today, the correct view of emptiness, the lack of inherent existence. It's a path once we generate renunciation at least, and then bodhicitta, so on the path of accumulation, path of preparation, in the continuum of an ordinary being, someone who hasn't yet perceptually or non-conceptually realized emptiness. So it's a path, but it becomes a true path when we get to the path of seeing, path of meditation, and beyond. So, so you can look at this relationship, this crossover between a path of the great scope, and when it becomes a true path in the continuum of that noble being, that bodhisattva who's an Arya Bodhisattva. So we've been looking at the three principal aspects of the path. From the method side, we've looked at renunciation and bodhicitta. And the third one, we looked today at the wisdom side, the correct view. And we'll be looking at how to apply that in daily life as well. And what we don't cover, we can carry over the daily life aspects. Otherwise, if we don't get to it today into the retreat part, in between our meditations, we'll have some time for questions or discussion and so forth. So let's jump to the wisdom side today. So what we're looking at here is the wisdom realizing emptiness. And what we're looking at is, because things are empty of independent existence, substantial existence, concrete existence, true existence, existing by way of its own character, by way of its own entity, established from the side of the object, by way of its own characteristics. There's so much terminology. Basically, it comes down to the wisdom realizing the lack or the emptiness of, it's always of something, of independent existence. In the middle way consequence school, all of those terms get at the same thing. So there's many variations you'll see. So why do we need to bother about learning about the correct view of emptiness? And this is from Lama Tsongkhapa. It's one of my most favorite verses, actually. He says, without the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, even though you've generated renunciation and the mind of enlightenment, you cannot cut the root cause of circling in samsara. Therefore, attempt the method to realize dependent arising. So I just treasure this quote. It's just so captivating, because even if we go so far as to develop renunciation and the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, even with those, we will still suffer. So there's no choice, really. If we want to be free of circling in samsara, in this controlled under karma and afflictions, where we continuously take rebirth after rebirth in any of the realms and continue to suffer endlessly, if we want to be free of that and to achieve liberation, then the only way is we're going to be dependent on this correct understanding of reality. So we can have renunciation and mind of enlightenment, but without the correct view, we won't achieve our goal. So this is very critical, because we praise, the mind of enlightenment. Amazing. Imagine having that. So how incredibly phenomenal that would be. It's mind-blowing. But without the wisdom realizing emptiness, whatever we do will only keep us in samsara. So for our virtue to go to enlightenment as it's intended with the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, motivating our actions, whatever we say, do, and think, for it to go to enlightenment, we must have it accompanied by the correct view. Okay, so then there's so many misconceptions about emptiness, and it's worth just clearing up a couple of them. So emptiness is not nothingness. And it's certainly not non-existence. It's not a form of nihilism. It's not that nothing exists. Oh, it's all empty. Nothing exists. This would be a total wrong understanding. When we look at the correct view, realizing emptiness, we're saying that things exist, and we can validate this with our experience. I exist, the table exists, the computer exists, we all exist. So it's not negating existence. It's negating how something appears to us as existing as if it was true. So what we're investigating is not whether things exist or not exist. We're investigating how they exist. That's what we must hold on to. We cannot fall into this wrong view of nihilism, thinking nothing exists at all. It doesn't matter what I say, don't think I can harm others, there's no consequences, there's nothing exists. Like, this is just utter nonsense. So it's not that nothing exists or that things are non-existent. This is just wrong thinking. What it is instead is that things are lacking an independent, inherent existence. And this is the way things do exist. So the way they appear and the way they exist is different. It's discordant. It's completely opposite. The way they appear to us due to having imprints of ignorance, the way they appear is if they have that concrete existence, that independent existence, and the emptiness of that is the lack of inherent existence is the actual way of being, their mode of abidance, mode of existence, the way they exist. Another misconception is, people think, oh, emptiness is, it's like meaningless and it's all just, hopelessness and all of these sorts of things, depressing even. It's the exact opposite of that and upsized. So with emptiness, when we understand that through our wisdom, our correct view of emptiness, then, all meaning is possible. We can create liberation and enlightenment. So all meaning becomes entirely possible through realizing emptiness, the lack of inherent existence. So it's very far from meaningless or bleak or hopeless. Another misunderstanding about emptiness is thinking that it can be fully understood exactly as it is through concepts and language. So this is not the way. So, what we need to develop is a direct realization of emptiness, which is beyond concepts, beyond conceptual thinking. It needs to be this non-conceptual realization of emptiness. And only then we will actually realize emptiness exactly as it is. It will appear in the way that it exists. And that will be, for the very first time through that path of seeing onwards. So before that, to get to that non-conceptual realization of reality, we need the support of reasons and logic and conceptual minds and, doubt turning towards the fact and developing correct assumptions, conceptual realizations, valid inference, subsequent cognizers. You would have looked at that, I think, with Venerable Yunten. So developing those realizations. So, we need the support of this conceptual understanding to break through to the non-conceptual realization. So conceptual realization comes before the non-conceptual. So just like, some people get really wrong ideas and think, we've got to just empty our mind of all concepts or all thinking. This is nonsense as well. So, if we were to empty our mind of all concepts, all thinking, we couldn't generate loving kindness, great compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. These are all, conceptually built up. So yeah, so an analogy that came to mind is like a boat. If we want to cross to the other shore, which is, from samsara to nirvana, liberation, enlightenment, great liberation. If we want to cross to the other shore, we do have to use the boat to get across. But when we get to the other shore, we don't continue to carry the boat with us. We just walk on our way. So the boat is a means, the conceptual work is a means, the reasons and logic, the means, this is all something that we need, but we cannot realize emptiness exactly as it is with a conceptual mind. So we do need language and concepts to get to such an understanding that becomes non-conceptual. We cannot discard concepts altogether or just empty the mind of thought. This is wrong thinking. Another misconception perhaps might be thinking that, with emptiness, oh, everything's the same, is all this oneness, this is not Buddhism as well. So to think like that would be utterly wrong, that there are no distinctions and everything's the same and all of that. Within emptiness, the lack of inherent existence is the same. So the emptiness of my mind, the emptiness of your mind, the emptiness of a Buddha's holy mind, totally the same. Lack of inherent existence, this negation, this lack, a negation of it being independent. concrete, substantial, inherent, truly existent, and so forth. So that lack of inherent existence is the same without division, without distinction. But what is distinct is the base on which the emptiness abides. So the ultimate truth and conventional truth on one object, and the base is different. The emptiness of my hand is different to the emptiness of the computer, the emptiness of the person, the emptiness of other phenomena. So emptiness is not getting at this oneness or something like that, you know, it's wrong thinking as well. So with emptiness, what we're looking at is getting to the way things exist. So the mode of abidance, the way the phenomena abides, its mode of existing, the way it exists. So this way of existing of all phenomena is its lack or emptiness of inherent existence. So this is what we need to develop. We need to develop the wisdom that realizes this mode of abiding, this mode of being. All right, so then with the correct view, what stops us developing this? And this would be our self-grasping ignorance. So as we saw the 8 worldly concerns stop the development of the mind of renunciation, self-cherishing stops developing the mind of bodhicitta, and self-grasping stops developing of the wisdom realizing emptiness. So we need to overcome this self-grasping ignorance, holding ourselves and other phenomena as if it had that concrete established existence from its own side that was unrelated to any cause and conditions, paths being merely labeled by the mind. We'll look at those 3 levels of dependent arising later. So grasping at the self and phenomena, the aggregates, the body and the mind, to exist in and of itself, independently, inherently, truly, etc. This is the self-grasping ignorance. And this is the root of why we circle in samsara. So what wisdom realizing emptiness is its wisdom, its mind, its wisdom, realizing the mode of abidance of all phenomena, its lack of inherent existence. Okay, so that's what we're looking at with this 3rd principal aspect of the path, the wisdom realizing emptiness of inherent existence. Okay, so phenomena exist. How do they exist is what gets investigated. So why do we need this wisdom realizing emptiness? Well, I've said before, whether you want to achieve liberation or enlightenment, if you've got the method, the 3 principal aspects, if you've got the method of renunciation, together with the correct view, you can go to liberation. If you've got the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, with the support of wisdom realizing emptiness, you can go to enlightenment. But without the wisdom realizing emptiness, you cannot go beyond samsara. So to attain either goal of liberation or enlightenment, to cut the root of samsara, that ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, that self-grasping ignorance, or ignorance grasping at a self, whatever way you want to phrase it, that self being the inherent existence of phenomena, the person or phenomena. So this wisdom realizing emptiness is the direct antidote. It's the powerful antidote to destroy the ignorance grasping at a self. It's only, as we'll see, that powerful antidote of the wisdom realizing emptiness that can uproot all of samsara and everything that arises on top of that. So all of our afflictions, karma, suffering, etc. All right, so in the meantime, this is quite hard for us, right, to get this understanding. But in the meantime, we can slowly try to begin to develop this mind, this wisdom that counters inherent existence. And so I might cover that bit later. I was just trying to think where I might go next, but I might just go on to look at this slide. If things existed inherently, if they did exist like that, what would be the consequences of that? What would be the ramifications? If things existed inherently, then they could never change. And we ourselves would always be as we are. We couldn't develop our minds to become Buddha and all of these sorts of things. If things existed inherently, remember they're going to be independent, unrelated. So therefore, they cannot be impacted by other causes and conditions. We would be locked into existence just as we are now. We could never change. We could never develop. Okay, we'd have to remain the same exactly as we are now. In fact, we would be quite static and frozen. We couldn't produce a next moment because that would be an impermanent phenomena that was dependently related to cause and conditions. So we couldn't produce a next moment. We would be frozen, static. We could never change, never interact. We couldn't interact with other living beings, couldn't have minds develop and so forth. We couldn't grow, we couldn't learn, we couldn't become wiser. So if things inherently existed, they would be independent rather than dependent. They would be independent, okay? Not depending, unrelated. These are the main words I think is good to hold on to, that if things existed inherently, they would be independent, which means not depend on causes and conditions. They wouldn't have parts because we would depend on our parts if, whatever phenomenon it was. And unrelated is a powerful one as well. So these three are very perfect to try to hold on to. So that's how things would exist inherently. And we can see that this is an impossible way of existing. But due to our ignorance, we have these imprints of ignorance that throw up the appearances of things existing in this concrete way, as if there is a concrete me, myself. And then there's, everything, there's me and there's you, there's me and there's other. There's me and my loved ones, my friends, so I'm going to protect them. And anyone who comes to harm, I'm going to, push away, develop aversion, anger, and so forth. So we divide the world into this self and other. Inherently existent self is how we appear, inherently existent other, as if there's no dependence, no relationship. Okay? And so this is the wrong thinking that we're trying to overcome. And what we want to develop is the realization that things are empty of inherent existence. And here's the reasoning, because things are empty of inherent existence, so they're the opposite of what we just saw. Because things are empty of or lacking independent existence, we can grow, we can develop, we can produce latter moments of mind. We can purify non-virtuous states of mind, afflicted states of mind. We can purify, we can develop their opposites, virtuous states of mind. We can continue to bring about this not only temporary happiness, but also liberation and enlightenment. So we can fulfill our own purpose with enlightenment, as well as the welfare of all others with enlightenment. We can fully develop all the realizations and fully abandon all mistakes and obscurations, and only that happens fully at enlightenment. So because things are empty is the reasoning that we can bring to actually not being stuck and static and frozen. I'm always going to be like this. I can't change. This is nonsense thinking, doesn't accord with reality at all, and only sabotages all our efforts. So suffering is not fixed. So, when we grasp at it as if it's inherently existent, we are the ones making it static and unchanging to appear that way to our minds, as if it's never going to be free of it. It'll always be this way. This is nonsense. So this is the mind coming into play here, creating our own unhappiness by solidifying, due to an appearance, solidifying as if it is like that. So suffering is not fixed, and therefore it too is lacking inherent existence, and it can be changed, it can be overcome, it can be countered. And so this is the fact, because suffering will change because it depends. It's not independent. Remember the last slide talked about inherent existence, independent. Suffering is not independent. It's not that it does not depend, that it's unrelated. It does depend. It is a dependent arising. Suffering is impermanent phenomenon. It exists in relation, in relationship, in relation to causes and conditions. And so we can change the conditions that will influence the suffering and what gives rise to the next moment and so forth. We can impact it and change our situation. So we're not ever stuck with how things are. And this is quite liberating. You can see how emptiness is not meaningless and purposeless and bleak and all of this sort of stuff. It brings great joy, even to hear the words emptiness. Oh gosh, it's amazing, right? Anyway, that's I used to think like that in 2010, North Carolina, Light of the Path, when Rinpoche would say Tompani, I'd like, oh, it's just in Tibetan, only emptiness, something like this. It would just bring such joy to my heart. And I would imagine never being able to hear the word Tompani ever again. Imagine being in the lower realms, unable to even hear the word emptiness, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, like this. So anyway, side note of rambling. So because we are empty of any inherent existence, i.e., I've just abbreviated, we can achieve liberation and enlightenment. And so this brings us great freedom. Because right now, what we're doing is we have this ignorance grasping at inherent existence, you see, and what's happening like that, because we have this ignorance grasping at inherent existence, we exaggerate things. We don't see them as they are called with reality. We exaggerate all these qualities onto objects. If we exaggerate 100% good qualities onto the object, we quickly develop attachment and cannot bear to be separated from it, whether it be a person or a thing or something like this. If we decorate with improper mental attention, if we exaggerate, superimpose negative attributes as if the object's 100% negative, then we develop aversion, anger, hatred. And out of the various afflictions, 84,000, we engage then in action. Karma means action, right? Action. So we engage in actions that have been caused by afflictions, which have been caused by improper mental attention, this exaggeration, superimposition, which has been caused by ignorance grasping at inherent existence. So this is a cause and effect process. And then out of karma and afflictions, our true origins, it gives rise to the result, true suffering, by which we circle again and again in samsara, endlessly, all because of this ignorance grasping at inherent existence. If we uproot ignorance, it cannot give rise to improper mental attention. It cannot give rise to afflictions, karma, nor suffering. So if we stop the cause, it cannot produce its result. So this is why we want to develop this wisdom, realizing the lack of inherent existence. Now, I want you to notice this. So inherent existence is the way ignorance is grasping self and phenomena to be. Wisdom is realizing the lack of inherent existence. See the differentiation between seeing the way of existing as inherent existence, lacking inherent existence. These two are exactly opposite. Okay, that's really important. I introduced you verse 9. Even if you've developed the thought of, wishing to definitely emerge from samsara, renunciation, and the mind of enlightenment, still you cannot cut the root of samsara. You have to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness, this dependent relation, right? Why can you not cut the root of samsara with renunciation and the mind of enlightenment? And it's because the renunciation and mind of enlightenment are not direct opposites to this wisdom, to this ignorance grasping at inherent existence. So let's have a look at a bit more detail on that in a second. So this non-conceptual wisdom that we're trying to develop from the path of seeing onwards, obviously developed in the, now, we start now and we develop until we enter the path and develop it to this non-conceptual state. This non-conceptual wisdom realizing emptiness is directly opposite, directly contradictory to the way ignorance grasps that inherent existence wisdom realizes the lack of inherent existence. It's completely opposite, directly opposing. And also, it's not just that it's directly opposing, because you could say, well, ignorance is directly opposing wisdom. See, it's more than that, right? So it's not just that they have an opposite way of holding the object, but it's more than that, because this wisdom is supported on reasons and logic. It accords with reality. Ignorance doesn't accord with reality. It's a wrong consciousness, a wrong mind, right? So, um, so yeah, not just directly contradictory, but wisdom supported on the basis, the foundation of reasons and logic. And it's true. This non-conceptual realization of emptiness, realizing reality, emptiness, appears as lacking inherent existence. And its way of being, its mode of abiding, is that it lacks inherent existence. So now, for the first time, what appears is true. The way it appears and the way it exists, these are in agreement. It's true. See, to every other mind of a sentient being, we're not in this non-conceptual realization of emptiness, this true path. We're not in that mind. Every other bit of phenomena that we see appears as if it's existing independently, but it doesn't exist like that at all. When we've exited that true path, we've exited that meditative equipoise from the path of seeing onwards, and we start to develop, the six perfections and accumulate masses of merit to bring back into our meditation, to destroy more of the afflictions. So when we finish that meditative equipoise and we go into post-attainment, post-meditative equipoise, subsequent attainment, then once again, all phenomena appear to us as existing concrete, substantially, independently, as if there's real table here, real computer here, real me here, real you there. Things appear to exist that way, but you've realized the nature of reality. You've realized their reality is their lack of inherent existence. So the way they appear and the way they exist in reality is discordant again, right? Before we had agreement in meditative equipoise, realizing reality, it was true. So because the way things appear and the way they exist is now discordant, but you've realized emptiness non-conceptually, at that point, you start to see all phenomena as like an illusion, appearing one way, but existing differently. And so it's like an illusion. So that's what I mean by true. And it's right manner in the sense that it accords with reality. It's a valid cognition. So it's not just that it's opposite, right? Not at all. It's so much more than that as to why this wisdom can destroy the ignorance and why the ignorance cannot destroy the wisdom. All right. So then let's say you're developing lesser views of wisdom. Let's say you develop the view of the wisdom realizing the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self, or the lack of a permanent, unitary, independent self, as if there's some kind of, soul or something, like some permanent self that goes from life to life. Anything lesser than the Prasangika view, middle way consequent school view, the highest view of tenets here, anything less than that will not cut the root of samsara. So even the middle way school below that, Svatantrika, you might have heard of Bhava Viveka, for instance, and Shantarakshita and all of these other beings. They have different views of Haribhadra, I think also, right? Different Nalanda masters have different views that they present. Of course, they themselves would have the final view, but to their students who are not yet ready for that final view, they present a different view. So these are all rungs on the ladder. And, even if you've developed those earlier wisdoms, they're still not enough to reach the bullseye. This target, this arrow cannot reach the target because it doesn't have the opposite mode of apprehension. Even if it's built on reasons and logic, it's still not true and a right manner. So the wisdom realizing the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self is not countering the ignorance that grasps at an inherently existent self. Such a wisdom would counter the ignorance that grasps at a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Then they would be opposing. Or if we had love, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, or a mind of patience. Anything less than this wisdom realizing the lack of inherent existence is going to fall short of the target. So nothing can uproot samsara and everything that's caused it, all of this ignorance and afflictions and so forth. Nothing can uproot the suffering of samsara like the actual wisdom realizing emptiness of inherent existence. Only that meets the target because of this directly opposing nature, reasons, and logic, true, and everything like that. Now, when you go into that meditative equipoise, realizing emptiness of inherent existence, it's going to be conceptual, and you're going to be realizing the lack of inherent existence, but it still has, a generic image because it's conceptual mind, and that generic image appears inherently existent, and, subject and object, the mind meditating on the emptiness, there is this distinction. Okay, so there's this conventionality, and subject and objects is different, appearance of true existence or inherent existence. This happens with the conceptual realization. But eventually what happens is we break through the generic image, break through the conception, and suddenly now subject and object is indistinguishable, this non-duality. This is the first moment where we don't have any appearances of true existence at all. So this would be that path of seeing onwards when you have that true path. So only that will start to unravel samsara. So this is why, we really need to focus on developing this mind of realizing emptiness, because whatever goal we want, liberation or enlightenment, it's all dependent on this. So if we can come to see the merely labeled object, that things exist not inherently, but as if they're merely labeled by the mind, the very subtle way of existing. If we can come to realize the merely labeled object, okay, how the way things appear as inherently existent, and the mind believing that to be true and grasping at it as true, this is our ignorance, right? Then it's through this ignorance that we're creating samsara. But if we can realize the way things are merely labeled, we will start to unravel all of this. And so Aryadeva, 400 stanzas, he says, even generating just a doubt. Can you imagine? We're already there. Just a doubt tending towards the fact that things, maybe they are lacking inherent existence. Even that shakes up our samsara. So we're already there. We haven't yet necessarily developed the correct understanding. We're still making inroads, and we haven't developed the realizations yet, but we are already going in an amazing way to unravel and destroy our samsara. So the merely labeled object, it appears inherently existent due to imprints of ignorance. It appears this way, and because of our ignorance, we grasp at it to exist that way, as if it was true. It's false. The way it appears, the way it exists, don't accord. It's false. It's not true, but it's true for ignorance, because ignorance believes it is like that things do exist independently. There is a me, Pema, here talking to you, and you exist very concretely out there, independently, that we are, distinctly related other entities. Yeah, like that. That'll do for now. So what we have to do is not trust our appearances. That's what's getting us into trouble, because things are appearing one way, but in actuality, they exist in an entirely different way. So the more we trust in our appearances, the more we embed ourselves further into samsara. So if we can, not trust in appearances and see hallucinations as hallucinations. So I've been talking about two terms: the mode of appearance, the way things appear, and the mode of existence or mode of abidance, the way things appear and the way they exist. Okay. These two, if they are different, they are false. If they agree, like on the path of seeing in that meditative equipoise, emptiness, the lack of inherent existence appears. How does emptiness exist? Emptiness also lacks inherent existence. So it's true for that one mind out of all the minds of sentient beings, that one mind. For a non-Buddha, it's only that one mind, non-conceptually realizing emptiness, that is true. Everything else appears false. But do we trust in those appearances? We need to start doubting our appearances, the way things exist. So conventional truths, the way they appear and the way they exist is false. Okay? So we start to train ourselves to not trust in these appearances. You seen this one? We can change the way we view ourselves and the world. So have a look at these camels here, right? But when you zoom in, the shadows are not the camels at all. These are the camels, these white patches. I think this is a National Geographic photo or something, photo of the year. It's quite amazing. So we see the camels, the shadow of the camel, as if that was the camel. We cannot trust in our appearances. So anything that brings up images where we can not buy into the appearances and believe and hold and grasp onto them as true is helping us right now to move into this direction of one day developing a correct view of emptiness. So we need to no longer be fooled by our appearances. Okay. All right. So then, all right, let's just see how you're traveling. How you going? Are you still with me? Yes? Good, good, good. This is important. So hopefully you're getting some benefit out of this. Remember, Ari Deva, even generating just a doubt. Maybe it is like that. Maybe things lack inherent existence. Just remembering that. Wow, amazing. It's destroying our samsara, our perpetual circling. So this takes time to digest and to hear again and again, and we have to start practicing these things, and then slowly, slowly we'll develop the understanding. Are you okay if I go on? Okay. So then let's have a look at a very important aspect for us to start to develop. This one here. This is the most critical. It takes the longest to develop. Once we develop this, then everything else will come so much easier. So what we need is to identify the object of negation, the object that we're trying to negate with wisdom. Do you remember ignorance sees things as inherently existent? And we need to negate with our wisdom that object of inherent existence. So we need to negate this inherent existence, okay? So there are different kinds of selves. Please don't fall into nihilism, thinking that the self doesn't exist. The self does exist. There is a self, there is a I. There is an I that will develop the realizations of renunciation, bodhicitta, correct view, the three principal aspects of the path. There is an I that will enter the Mahayana path of accumulation and traverse the five paths to enlightenment. There is an I that does exist. What doesn't exist is the I that appears to inherently exist. There is a conventionally existing I that is merely labeled by the mind, okay, that circles in samsara and will achieve liberation and enlightenment. That's not to be negated. That's an existent. But this inherently existent self has never existed. It appears as if we inherently exist due to ignorance, but we've never actually existed that way at all. It's just an appearance that's thrown up because we have ignorance. So we must identify the self to be refuted. And if we can refute that self, that inherently existent self, if we can realize its non-existence, its emptiness, then that is the selflessness. So we talk about, two selves, a self that exists, conventionally exists. The mere I, we call it in the Prasangika view, it's merely labeled by the mind in dependence on or having a body and mind. Okay, the five aggregates, the self is merely labeled in dependence on the five aggregates. It's not that one of the aggregates is the self or all five aggregates are the self, not like that. It's merely labeled in dependence on a basis. So the self exists in dependence on the basis, but you cannot find the self within the basis. It's not any of the five aggregates. It's not one of them or all five of them. And it's certainly not something inherently different over here to be found, unrelated to the body and mind. When we talk about I think, I feel, I'm hungry, I'm walking, I'm talking, these are all activities that are happening in dependence on the aggregates, the body and mind. Aggregates sometimes sounds a little bit fancy, the five aggregates. It just condenses into body and mind. Okay, so whichever one is suitable for you. So you must identify the self to be refuted, negated, the object of negation, the inherently existent self that has never existed. And if we can realize its non-existence, then that is the selflessness. So don't worry about too much about that if it's confusing. But what we do need to do is identify the object of negation, identify the inherently existent self. This is the first thing we must do, which is why I showed you first up those slides of if it was an inherently existent, self that existed, then these would be the consequences of that. Because the more we understand, if I inherently existed, how would that be? Then we can come to see through dependent arising that we don't exist in that way, in that independent, not depending, unrelated, static, frozen way where we could not ever change even a moment. Okay? So one of the analogies is about shooting an arrow. I tried to show you in that previous slide about the arrow and shooting the target. So unless you cannot shoot an arrow if you cannot see the target. So if you cannot see the target, whatever arrow you shoot will come nowhere near the target unless you can see where the target is. So if we're trying to develop this wisdom realizing emptiness, we have to see the target that we want to hit and destroy. And what is wisdom trying to destroy? The ignorance that grasps that inherent existence. So that's our target. We have to shoot the arrow of wisdom at the target to penetrate directly that ignorance, to overcome it, destroy it. Okay, so we need to identify, if I inherently existed, how would that be? And another analogy is about trying to catch a thief. So this analogy here is about trying to catch a thief, and say you're in an apartment building and you've always believed that there's an inherently existent self, or a thief in the analogy. You've always believed that there's a thief in the apartment building. And so if you're going to capture this thief and try to find this thief, then you're going to need to know exactly what that thief looks like. So we believe there's a thief in the apartment building, and in dependence on that belief, we generate fear and panic and, lock the doors and windows and try to secure our valuables, our attachments and all of this sort of thing. We're utterly convinced that we generate these feelings and responses and afflictions and so forth in dependence on this belief, okay, that there's this thief there. But if someone comes along, like the Buddha, and says there's no thief at all, it's not going to be enough to convince us. We're utterly convinced, even our whole lifetime, that there's a thief in the building. Okay? Utterly convinced. And we react and respond as if there is a thief. So someone just merely saying with words, okay, there's no thief at all here, that won't be enough. We need to know through our own experience that there is no thief, because we've utterly believed it our entire life, that there is a thief somewhere in the building. So if we're going to, through our own experience, come to realize there is no thief in the building, we cannot just rely on the words and concepts of another. We have to experience this ourselves. Then we need to know what we're looking for. We need to know how to identify the thief if there is such a thief. We need to establish exactly what the thief looks like so that we can find if there is a thief or is there no thief. That's really hard to say. All right. So we need to know and identify the thief if there is one. So we need to know exactly what that thief looks like. And so I gave an image there of like an identikit, because, you know, like when you do a police sketch and stuff like that, it sounds to me like, you know, going into every fine detail of how the thief would exist if we were to try to look for the thief and catch the thief. We can't just run around accusing anyone and everyone of being a thief in the apartment block. We need to know exactly what the thief looks like that we're looking for so that we can identify and catch him and then throw him out. Or that's one option. Or if we find that there is no thief, then we can relax and not give rise to all this fear and attachment and aversion and all of these sorts of things, locking up the jewels and being scared and frightened and so forth. So we need to identify a thief, and we can't just go by the descriptions of somebody else. Oh, the thief is a man. He was Caucasian. He was wearing white. We can't just follow whatever description someone else tells us. And this is why we won't realize emptiness non-conceptually exactly as it appears, as lacking inherent existence, appearing that way and existing that way, true. We won't be able to realize that if we just rely on somebody else's description. So we really have to study, listen to teachings on how to, develop this wisdom. We then need to take it to our cushion and reflect on it and apply it to ourselves and hold through our analytical meditations, hold the conclusion single-pointedly, and again and again and again and again and again, meditate to develop this realization. So just relying on someone else's description for the thief or of, how things inherently existed and how they don't inherently exist is not going to be enough. We need to put it into practice ourselves. So we can't just rely on someone else's description or mere mental images, our generic image. It's not going to help us break through beyond appearances of true existence. So we must recognize the object of negation, inherent existence ourselves through vivid, naked, personal mental experiences brought on by analytical process. If you think of say you've got a car, maybe it's in the garage, however you say that word in your country, garage, garage, however it's said, carport, whatever you call it in your place. If you bring to mind your car right now, you're not seeing it vividly with your eye consciousness. You're bringing to mind your car through the use of a generic image. It's a conceptual mind to realize your car. You can see your car, you can see the shape of the car, the color of the car, the condition of the car through this generic image. You can bring it to mind, you can realize it, but you can't see it vividly as if it was in high definition right in front of you, okay? And that's what we're doing with the mental consciousness when we meditate on emptiness. It's going to be high definition from that path of seeing onwards. So what else to say about this? So vivid, naked, all of this sort of stuff. So how are we going to get there? Well, remember Lama Tsongkhapa, verse 9, three principal aspects. He said, that we need to realize this ultimate reality. We need to rely on dependent arising. So dependent arising is the conventional truth way to find the reality. So our conventional truth is the means or the way to discover the ultimate truth, emptiness. So we have to rely on dependent arising, reasons and logic and so forth, all this conventional truth to break through to this reality of ultimate truth, emptiness. And so in realizing things through dependent arising, there's three main levels. So here's some reasoning. It's good to write this bit down. Write these three sections down, okay? The three main levels of dependent arising. So here we go. Things are empty of inherent existence. There's our subject. Things are empty of inherent existence. That's our thesis we're trying to prove. What's the reason? We're looking for a because they are dependent arising. This is one of the reasonings that we can use to come to realize dependent arising, that things are empty of inherent existence. If things are dependent arising, necessarily they are empty of inherent existence. Okay? If something is inherently existent, it cannot be a dependent arising. So whatever is a dependent arising is necessarily empty of inherent existence. So whether it be the things that is oneself, one's loved ones, whatever one's trying to realize the emptiness of, the body, the mind, and all of these sorts of things, we can realize that they are empty of inherent existence because they are a dependent arising. So dependent arising has got these three main ways of increasingly getting more subtle to approach the understanding of emptiness. Okay. So things are empty of inherent existence. Here's the first one. What happened here? Let me just see. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, things are empty of inherent existence because they're dependent arising. This is what we're doing, right? So things are empty of inherent existence because they depend on causes and conditions. That's a very coarse level of getting us closer to realizing the ultimate reality, emptiness. Because things depend on causes and conditions, it means they're not static and frozen and independent and unrelated, but they do relate to they relate to causes and conditions. They can be impacted and change, okay? Develop and grow. So we can cultivate happiness through virtuous states of mind, virtuous actions like that. So this level of reasoning can start to bring us closer to realizing things are empty of inherent existence because of being a dependent arising. If we can realize things are dependent on cause and conditions, things are empty of inherent existence because they have parts. Now, not all phenomena are things. Not all phenomena are impermanent. Not all phenomena depend on causes and conditions. There are impermanent phenomena that depend on causes and conditions, changing moment by moment, our mind, our body, and most of everything we interact with. But there are also permanent phenomena that exist, but they don't change momentarily. They don't depend on causes and conditions. Things like emptiness itself is permanent. Generic images are permanent. If you are angry with somebody, you have this generic image of they're, horrible and not nice, and I'm going to avoid them whenever I see them. And then when you see them 3 days later, you still bring them to mind, or thinking about them in your room trying to meditate, you bring them to mind through this generic image of them being horrible and evil and unkind. And so, it's like a permanent way of seeing until eventually there's an occasional permanence. We can update our generic images, but they're not changing moment by moment. So you've got permanent phenomena, impermanent phenomena. Uncompounded space is permanent. Emptiness is permanent. True cessations are permanent, like this. But most of what we interact with, because we're interacting dependent on cause and condition, we're interacting with anything and everything, and it's all changing moment by moment. And although we don't see this subtle change moment by moment, we know that things break, relationships break, ourselves, we get sick, we die, these sorts of things. Then that's all that at that gross level of change. I can smash something gross level, but at a subtle level, things are changing momentarily. We can realize it eventually. So why I gave all of that blah, blah, blah is because things are empty of inherent existence because they depend on parts. All phenomena depend on parts, not just impermanent phenomena, but permanent phenomena too depend on parts. So this is another way of getting closer to the truth, to reality, which, by the way, all the Buddha's teachings were for the purpose of developing the truth, reality. Things are empty of inherent existence, a more subtle level, improving that thesis because they're merely labeled by the mind. So the way we label things has a very, very, very big impact. And what we want to do is recognize our labeling. So even just, the way we label something, whether it's a problem or not a problem, the way we label it, it's going to appear back to us as that. So for instance, I just want to check something here. Let me just move this out the way. Okay. So yeah. So the way we label something is most of the problem we get ourselves into. And so 24 hours a day, we're constantly labeling things and it really impacts our mind. So what kind of label are we giving to things, to people, to our relationships, to ourselves? What kind of label are we putting on ourselves? If it's a negative label or a positive label, because whatever label we give it, it's going to appear back as that, all negative, generating afflictions in response to it and so forth. Or we can transform our problems by giving it a different label instead of being a problem and, we can label it in a positive way to transform it. Remember Shantideva? Suffering has many good qualities, and he listed off about 6 qualities or more about the benefits of suffering. Okay, reducing our pride and stopping non-virtue, cultivating virtue, generating renunciation, taking refuge, and all these things. Lama Tsongkhapa added that one. All of these sorts of things, amazing. Sufferings are wonderful because it spurs us to go beyond just being satisfied with beautiful painted walls and tankas and pictures and thinking, samsara is so lovely. We want to go beyond samsara entirely. So the way we label things, instead of, the suffering, instead of it being something to, have aversion to, we can transform that mind by giving it a better label, seeing our problems, our difficulties, our challenges as beneficial, purifying negative karma now in this human rebirth so that I don't need to experience that ripening in the future when it's had a chance to increase in intensity. Karma increases, remember? And experience it in the lower realms. So right now we're human and we sort of think, well, if I do accept future lives, I'm always going to be human. We had this wrong thinking, even if we do have the good thinking of accepting future lives. So we won't always have these conditions. And so the way things appear back to us is dependent on how we've labeled it. And so even for ourselves, instead of getting upset, if we can give things a positive spin, a positive label, try to see the good in something, then it's going to appear back to us in that more beneficial way. So our mind will be made happy. So remember, mind is the creator of happiness and suffering. And that depends on the labeling that we give things. So this is how we can subdue our mind. Remember, subdue our mind. This is a teaching of the Buddha. So to look at this wisdom and developing this dependent arising and even how we label things. Okay, so another good one for daily practice also is, when something appears to us as a problem, investigate, because it's appearing as an inherently existent concrete problem. So where is the problem? Which part is the problem? Is it this part? Is it this bit? If someone criticizes us, and they say the words, you're so horrible, or you know nothing, or whatever, whatever they'd say or do to hurt us. Let's say, you know, you think you're so good. You think you're so good. 5 words. So break it down. Which are the parts? Okay, the five. Which part is the part that hurts me? Is it when they said you? When they said no? You are, sorry, no good, whatever the words might be. Break down the parts, break down the syllables. This is whatever. When someone's abusing us, criticizing us, we can go off in our own little land and do a meditation on trying to realize the emptiness of the inherent existence in the criticism, the words that are spoken, and so forth. Is the problem real? Is it lasting? Is it permanent? Is it static and frozen and always going to be like that? No, it depends on causes and conditions. So do a meditation on how we label things as a problem and see if you can find the real problem. Because if it's criticism, it's just sound. It's just sound hitting the ears, just syllables. You are no good. Just sound. What if they said you are good? They leave out one word. They leave out two letters, N-O. Two letters, one word. Suddenly, you are no good. And they say you are good. Oh, we're very happy. Very happy. Praise us. We like that. We want more of that. 8 worldly concerns come into play, isn't it? So one two-letter word, you are no good. We develop, this mind of anger that we've been criticized and blamed, caught up, hooked by the 8 worldly concerns. You are good. Oh, how wonderful. Please tell me more. So it's all in the labeling, okay? So I'll just go back to see what I had on this slide, and because I might do just a little bit more with you. So the first level of dependent arising that I want you to definitely make note of is these causes and conditions, okay? So that's the first level. I'm just going to introduce 3. You can really talk about it being 5 levels, but I think I'm just going to do 3. First level of dependent arising, causes and conditions. So things are empty of inherent existence because they depend on causes and conditions. So look at this body, how many causes and conditions it depends upon. Right back from the causes of the semen and the egg of the parents, the fertilized ovum, depending on that to impure substances, right? To develop this body. This body has so many causes and conditions coming together to produce it in each moment. It's not changing, it's not static and unchanged. So this body is empty of inherent existence because it depends on cause and conditions. It is also empty of inherent existence because it depends on parts. So for instance, you look at all the various parts of the body from the head to the toes, and you do this in meditation. The way I appear appears so solidly. This is the object to be negated. But when I investigate using dependent arising, I can see that even the head is dependent on the parts of the skull, the hair, the eyes, the eyebrows, the eyelashes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, the mouth, so many parts coming together by which I give the label head. So head is merely labeled in dependence on the parts. This mind of mind is merely labeled mind in dependence on its parts. When we think of the parts of the mind, we can think of the past moment of mind, the present moment of mind, the future moment of mind. We did mind and mental factors in DB, right? Module 1 with Venerable Yunten. And so you looked at the different types of mind, the 51 mental factors, the 6 main minds. You looked at, the virtuous minds and non-virtuous minds and all of these sorts of types of minds. So all of these are the parts that make up this mind, that we call mind. It does not inherently exist because it's dependent on parts. So this is another level of dependent arising to get us closer to realizing the lack of inherent existence of whatever the subject is, things or my body, my mind, the problem, whatever it is, this person, if we're developing great attachment, So say we've got this great attachment towards, for instance, like our partner or something, you can look at what am I so attached to and break down this inherently existent partner appears so concretely as so wonderful, so attractive, so gorgeous. Which part is it that is so gorgeous? And so is it their skin? Is it their nails? Is it their organs? Is it their arm, their leg, their spleen? Is it their snot? Is it their bile and phlegm and pus and blood and all of these sorts of things? So when we have this out of control attachment, it's good to do a meditation on that, or just say you have on the impurity of the body and so forth. Also, if you're attached to somebody, you know, and they're appearing inherently existent as if they are that, you know, which bit am I so attached to? And you can do a meditation on this to actually lessen the clinging entirely, because what you find is there is nothing that you can actually hold on to as if that is that person. That person is nothing other than a name given to the collection of parts. This person exists in dependence on many causes and conditions. And so in this way, there is no inherently existent self existing from their own side. So you look at a watch, you know, and it looks so solidly existing from there, right? And we generate attachment to my watch and don't touch it. You can look, but don't touch, you know, all of these sorts of things. But the watch itself is just made up of so many different parts all coming together. And we label the word watch in dependence on its parts. But if we take apart all those different parts, where is the watch? There is no watch to be found amongst all of those parts. Even the parts all assembled together, there is a whole. If we search within that basis for watch, we will not find watch. The watch is merely labeled watch in dependence on those parts coming together, functioning in a particular way, all agreed upon by, you know, watch, Mr. Watch person or Mrs. Watch person, whoever invented that word watch, whoever invented the watch and gave it the name watch. And then we all go, oh, yeah, we agree. Yeah. As a society, we call that watch. So this is a watch. This is not a watch. We all agree. If I called this a watch, this would be a wrong consciousness. We all agree that is a watch. Watch exists and it tells me the time. But if I was to search for that independent, inherently existent watch existing from its own side as if it's watch there, watch is not to be found amongst all of those parts. It's merely the label given to that object that functions in that particular way. So this third level of dependent arising merely labeled all phenomena, oneself, our loved ones, our possessions, our, you know, good qualities, everything, all phenomena exist merely, only, merely in name. Amazing. So we really have to meditate on this. There's the reasoning that we can take to mind that things are empty of inherent existence, or I am empty of inherent existence, my loved one, whatever their name is empty of inherent existence, because they're merely labeled by the mind. When we search for amongst the body and mind, we will not find Pema. Pema is merely labeled in dependence on this body and mind, not somebody else's body and mind, and I appear to you as Pema. But if you were to search for the way I appear, this inherently existent Pema, that's the object of negation. If you were to search for me amongst my body and mind, you will not find me in my body, in my mind, the parts of my body and mind. You will not find me separate to my body and mind. And so we will come to see that Pema is merely labeled in dependence on the body and mind, but not found within it or separate to it, merely labeled. Amazing. So this is how we end samsara. This is how we cut the root entirely of all our suffering. Okay, so let me just stop there. How are you traveling? Oh, mind-blowing. Hopefully it's beneficial and helpful. Yeah. We can do one of two things. We can have a look at some exercises that we can take into our daily life. Would you like to do that? Or we can ask some questions. What would you like to do? Question, anyone? Or daily life? Yes, Susan's got a question. How can I help, Susan?
Hi, so here's where I get a little stuck. I agree with all of that. All of that makes sense to me. But my
Right.
remaining question is, well, why can't it be the collection of parts? Like I
Yes,
understand the
exactly.
logic, right? If each individual part isn't it, then how
Correct.
could a collection of not it become it? And I agree with that logic. But there's just this voice in me that's like, well, why couldn't it be the collection? And I guess I'm having
Exactly.
trouble kind of refuting that.
Yeah. So did you notice, Susan, that I said, about talking about the collection coming together and functioning in a particular way and all of these sorts of things. So even just the collection of the parts of the watch all spread out on the table is not even functioning as a watch to be given the label watch, is it? So even the collection that's not found within the watch face, the winder, the strap, and all of these things, the little spring, there's no part that is watch. And even the collection of parts is not watch. It's only when things come together and are assembled in a particular way and function in a particular way, we can label it watch. But watch itself is nothing other than what is merely labeled in dependence on that basis, coming together in that way and functioning. And this is the way even ourselves exist. We feel quite, there's a me, right? It feels like a solid me, particularly if someone abuses us or attacks us or criticizes us, that me rises up inside to defend itself, doesn't it? But where is this me? Where is this me to defend that is appearing so solidly? And that's when we take to our cushion and do that meditation by recalling how I appeared at that particular time as existing in this solid way, ready to defend and generate all those afflictions and perpetuate my samsara. How did I appear? So when you generate that image of how you appeared in that moment, then you investigate. That's your object of negation. So then you investigate, where is that inherently existent self appearing? I'm either going to find it somewhere in the body, the mind, right? You go through the meditation, all the different parts of the body, parts of the mind, and so forth. And if you can't find it in the body and the mind, and you can't find it separate to the body and mind, unrelated to these aggregates that think and feel and eat and all the different activities I do. If the I is not found one with the body and mind, nor separate to the body and mind, we have to conclude there's only two options. It's either one with or the one with the body mind or separate to the body mind. If we don't find it in either way, we have to conclude that that inherently existent self, which was not found in the body and mind nor separate to it, doesn't exist. This not finding an inherently existent self is the emptiness of inherent existent self. Because had the object of negation, inherent existent self, had it, which appears, had it been found, it had to be found in one of two ways, within the body and mind or separate to the body and mind. It cannot exist in any other way. It's either, if it exists, it's either one with the body and mind, the aggregates, or separate to the body and mind as a separate piece, unrelated to what's experiencing in the body and mind. So if it's not found in the body and mind, within all the parts and so forth, and it's not found separate to the body and mind, we have to conclude it does not exist. This would be the non-finding. What we find is the lack of inherent existence self, the emptiness of the inherent existence itself. Joe, have you got something to add? Where
I
are
hope so.
you?
Apart from
Where are
yes,
you?
I
Oh, I
know.
can't see your camera. That's
So
right.
I've gone. Well, I've gone from my red square to
Mm.
nothing. So I must be proof of I must be empty of inherent existence. That's the first point.
Sorry, you lost me with the red square business.
Yeah,
What's
well,
going on?
I was appearing as Joe in my red square. I've now tried to put my um, video on,
Oh.
and now, so this is proof that I'm now empty of inherent existence. That
Okay,
that
Joe,
that
I
wasn't my point.
no, but you told me at the beginning you were a troublemaker. So actually you bring a good point. Because if I cannot identify you, Joe, right? I don't even know what you look like. So how
Mm-hmm,
can I identify you if I'm to negate you existing? Because it like you know Isabella, right? We all know
mm-hmm.
Isabella and Bay, both of them. We know what they look like. So we can say, when I look at the faces that I can see, I can say there is no Bay here. There is no Isabella here, right? Because I've identified what they look like and I can search for them, and there is no Isabella appearing and no Bay appearing to me. So we are empty of Isabella and empty of Bay this week, right? So we've
Yep.
got to be able to identify. So you just prompted that, Joe. So well done.
Thank you. And I wonder if I might make a contribution, which I'll try to keep short. Um, I a few years ago, I wrote a journal article. I think a lot, and in the mental health field,
Oh,
a common saying is, to challenge diagnostic labeling. People
oh, great.
say labels are for jars, not people. So
Good.
I took that as a starting point, and I said, well, actually, I think the problem is the fact that we even label jars. And out of that, I said, we create these elaborate systems of classifications, and then we imbue value to these different levels. And
Yes.
and in the world of work, for example, we say that somebody is worth more, but by
Yes.
giving them a higher salary. So I'm
Right.
trying to say to people, there's no human being on this earth who is inherently more valuable than another,
Very true.
and um, and it's all false. And I did a presentation in June at a mental health conference, and I said, I singled out psychiatrists. I said, I see you struggling because you have this job title, and everybody has high expectations of you. You can't
Mm.
possibly fulfill them all,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so in a way, you're struggling from, I say imposter syndrome is real because all of
Mm.
us in certain situations are imposters,
Mm-hmm.
and yet you have a lot of pressure, and you convince yourselves, or you try to convince yourselves, that you are what people expect you to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I say it's impossible. So let's get rid of all the labels. We are just humans. Um,
Sure.
so I'm trying to uh, persuade people to think in that way.
Sure. I can see some benefit there for sure, Joe. Wonderful. And also to help with developing equanimity and all of these sorts of
Mm-hmm,
things.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, good, good. Well done. Damien, you've got a question, and also I think someone else has as well. Damien, let's go to you first.
Hi, Pema. I understand the
I can't
concept.
hear a word yet.
Oh,
So start back at the beginning.
can you hear me now?
Oh no, Damien, can you guys hear him?
Anyone? Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Damien, I've just got the audio now coming through for the first time.
Okay. Great. My question. So I understand, the lack of inherent existence in phenomena. However, something that's been challenging is if there is a negative phenomena, well, let's just call it a negative, like a natural disaster, for example.
A
Um,
disaster?
yeah, a natural disaster,
Sure, sure,
for
sure.
example.
Earthquakes you guys get and all that lots, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand I understand in inherent in the existence of that. Inherent. Yeah. Yeah.
The lack of or the appearing
The lack
inherently.
of. I understand the emptiness of it.
Great.
However, it still does cause suffering, right?
Absolutely.
So to combat that, should we, just focus on the emptiness and just recognize that, well, it's just temporary suffering? Is that how you kind of get through that type of negative phenomena?
I think you've got to give rise to compassion, straight away. You're in a situation that's a negative, it's a natural disaster or something, compassion instantly arises, right? So you help in whatever way you can, use that method side. There's certainly the way you label it. You could label it in many ways in Buddhism. This is according to our karma. And so karma is not about blame. You'll learn that when you do 2 modules from now, I think. So it's not about blame at all. It's just, this is our karma, this is our experience. You can, I think, just go straight to compassion and help whatever way you can. But the way you're labeling it is not, yes, it's giving rise to the afflictions that you talked about, Damien, didn't you? It gives rise to all the,
Right.
emotional responses. But so did the thief in the apartment building, right? When we believed there was a thief in the apartment building, we generated fear and all of those emotional responses.
Right.
So, and it also lacked inherent existence because there was no thief. We couldn't throw out the thief because the thief never existed in the first place in that way. So the earthquake exists, but it doesn't exist in the way it appears, as if it's this solid, something from its own side, like that. It's merely labeled earthquake in dependence on all the causes and conditions coming together and the parts and so forth. So it can help us to develop some wisdom to not go down the path of attachment and aversion.
Right.
But to stay in wisdom and then deal with and attend to what needs to be done. So it's just to try to stop us going down, the path of afflictions and so forth. But you become very active, right? Because you've got your 2 wings. So you've got your wisdom wing with how you're seeing it, and then how you're responding to self, your needs, and others with your compassion wing.
Right. Okay. So would it be fair, for example, to then see negative phenomena as an illusion, and similarly,
like you've got to qualify,
right.
Damien, because it's not an illusion, because illusions don't actually exist. It's an
Okay.
illusion, whereas things do exist. So they are like an illusion in the sense that they appear one way, but don't exist that way. They appear inherently existent, but don't exist inherently existent, because the way they exist is lacking inherent existence. But things still exist. So it's better to use the term like an illusion, not saying it is an illusion.
Okay.
Because it is real in the sense that it's existing. But what's not real is how it appears to us, because it appears to our ignorance as inherently existing. It exists, but it does not exist inherently, because then it would have to exist independently, and how it exists is in relation to other and so forth. It's a dependent arising. So dependent arising and emptiness get to the same meaning, but from 2 different ways of looking at it. So things are empty of inherent existence because they're a dependent arising. Things are a dependent arising because they're empty of inherent existence. If something was not empty of inherent existence, if it was not empty of inherent existence, in other words, if it was inherently existent, remember, it can't depend, it can't relate, it cannot be impacted. So the meaning is the same. Because things are empty of inherent existence, things can arise. There is a dependency. Okay? So dependent arising is often the good way to get to the same meaning. Because things depend on cause and conditions, parts, and merely labeled by the mind, necessarily they're empty of inherent existence. And this is why Lama Tsongkhapa tells us to study, meditate on dependent arising to get to the ultimate reality, the meaning of emptiness. Does that help a little bit, Damien?
It does. Thank you, Pema.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your questions. Is there anyone else who had a question? Otherwise, we'll have to go to the dedication. I'm mindful of taking your time. Okay, so we meet next on Sunday for you guys for 3 hours. So that's a long one. We'll try to do some meditation, have a little bit of break, maybe a discussion or Q&A, or some daily activities on how to, take emptiness into the path, and then, do another meditation, and then maybe have a break, and then another meditation, and have a break like this. And then those doing the exam will let Isabella know, I imagine by now, to study well. So let's just to conclude, if we're going to realize emptiness and so forth, we need to have a devotion to the spiritual mentor, because we need to not just have this intellectual approach, but it needs to give rise to blessings, inspiration, blessings on the basis of which realizations will come. We need to accumulate a lot of merit, purify a lot of negativity, and petition the Guru. Petition the Guru inseparable from your deity, for instance, Manjushri and so forth. So, all right, let's go to the dedications. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to the right slide here for you now. I've got a hyperlink on this one, so I can jump to it here. Okay, so how wonderful, how glorious, totally glorious, coming together to discuss the correct view, emptiness of inherent existence, one of the three principal aspects of the path, and one of the true paths when it's in the continuum of an Arya being from the path of seeing onwards. So how amazing, how fortunate. This wisdom, this correct view of emptiness is for the middle scope and the great scope to realize either liberation or enlightenment. How amazing, how wonderful. So we've accumulated so much virtue, you could not even imagine. If it took shape, the sky would not contain it. It's just so incredible. So let's dedicate this merit to every single sentient being. May they come to realize emptiness as quick as possible and be free of their own samsara and achieve liberation and enlightenment. And we can do the prayers to increase bodhicitta in the correct view and the two stages. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. And then the two stages. May the precious realization of the two stages not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Remember, that's highest yoga tantra generation completion stages. For His Holiness, the Long Life Prayer, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. The verses for the swift return of Kabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Fearless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Prataka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, so thank you, everyone. So yeah, hopefully that was okay for you. I'm sorry I did go a little bit over time, but hopefully it was still some benefit in there. And yeah, and thank you, and see you in a few days' time. What is it, half a week or something?
Mm-hmm. Thank you,
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you, and thank you, Urs, today. Thank you, Urs.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you, Urs.
Thank you.
Urs.
Keep well, everyone. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.